Now, one of the arguments I want to focus on right now is called the argument from personal transformation. Now, you all know the drill. There are plenty of testimonies out there, and I'm sure you've heard a number of them, of go along the lines of, I used to be Mr. Cocaine Sex, I used to be Mr. Cocaine Sex, and then I met Jesus, and now I won't have sex before marriage, and I can't afford cocaine to save my life. No, you know the drill. I used to be Mr. This is how I used to be in my old ways, my old man, as the Christians will say. And then I became a Christian and, the whole world opened up to me. Now, hypothetically at least, there does seem to be a transformational power available to the practicing Christian. Correct. Now, there are a lot of these type of testimonies on the ground floor that you actually know firsthand and probably for the most part almost completely believe, correct? Let's take someone like David Wood. Probably everyone listens to me know who David Wood is. If you don't, David Wood Apologetics. You can look up his testimony. I'm sure it's somewhere in his videos. I've heard it a couple times. Almost every time he's in a debate, he seems to lay down some version of it, where he used to be some form of diagnostically declared psychopath, and he was really, really troubled and in prison and hit his father in the head with the hammer. Then he became a Christian, was able to somehow heal and overcome all of that. Now, almost everyone listening to me has heard some variation of that testimony of his, right? Well, here's the interesting part. I don't think there's a single person listening to me who doubts that. Anybody? Do you not believe him? Almost everyone who's heard it believes him to some degree, including all the atheists. You know he's telling the truth to some degree. They'll even make snide jokes like, I hope he stays a Christian because I don't want him hitting people over the head with the hammer. It's really better for him. But yet you ignore the evidence. You claim there's no evidence for God, and there's clear evidence right in front of your face. That's just one example, okay? I brought up testimony from my own life, and so far nobody has ever doubted that this is the truth, and it's a God's honest truth about my own life and my own experience. When I first became a Christian, I was functional alcoholic, but functional is really debatable. I would go out on a Friday, Saturday night. It was nothing. I'd have like 12 vodka cranberries in a single sitting. And I've been at earlier times in my life, not functional alcoholic, totally addicted to drugs and alcohol. And at the time when I became a Christian, I had calmed down a little, but I was still a big enough drinker to qualify as an alcoholic, and I smoked about 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Now, within the year, I stopped doing all of that completely. Haven't had a drink in 15 or 20 years, and haven't had to. At the beginning, I went to a couple of AA meetings, haven't bothered to go for years, and haven't even thought about drinking since then. Now, all of you believe that to some degree, right? The question is, how are you not processing that as some form of evidence for at least the power of religious experiences? How are you not processing that as some type of evidence for some of the claims of Christianity? That's a claim of Christianity, that God will transform your life, that there is a power available to the practicing Christian that is transformational in nature. Now, those claims are one mouse click away from you. There's 5,500 of them on YouTube that you can click on, and almost all of them are plausible, to the point where you actually believe them to some degree. How are you not processing it as some type of evidence is the question I'm asking. Because it seems to me, these same people who say there's no evidence, you'll present them with that type of situation, and they know you're telling the truth, but yet they don't process it at all as evidence, even a little. How? The most common objection I hear from most of the atheists who try to, what they do is they have a strategy to debunk or dismiss or discredit it somehow. The most common objection I hear from most atheists is, Craig, there are Hindus out there who they say, they have transformational power they have testimonies of their religion. Okay, but here's the interesting thing. I don't see you investigating their claims either. I don't see you clicking on their links or trying to figure out the truth behind their claims either. You just kind of hand write it off all. And I have listened to the Hindu claims. And here's the other interesting thing. I believe them. There is a Hindu who used to be on my channel a few times, Aryunu, who I mention a lot. I watched one of the debates with one of his boys, Josh Wolf. Josh Wolf, in this debate, who's a practicing Hindu now, lays down a quote-unquote miraculous claim about how he used to smoke all this weed, and then he started learning his Hindu mantras and his Hindu chants, and he started doing his Hindu chants, and he stopped. He was able to put the weed down because he was no longer plagued by the anxiety that used to trouble him so much. And here's the interesting thing. I 100% believe him. I 100% believe him, almost positive he's telling the truth. And when my family came out to California and saw the transformation in me, the transformation was so stark. My brother-in-law and my sister, I've told this story before, but it bears repeating, were so impressed by the transformation in me, so stark was it to them that they became Christians on the spot. That's the God's honest truth. Became Christians on the spot. Well, wait a minute. Now, to some degree, okay, they were looking for some of what my church and the religious experience that I was talking about had to offer. That had a lot to do with it. They were to some degree motivated to become Christian. My sister had been interested in finding religion for them, a religious service for them to become a part of as soon as she was raising her kids, because she just thought it was right to raise her kids within a religious tradition. And maybe, some people, there's still people out there who are like that, by the way. If you're an anti-theist, wrap your brain around that. This is a perfectly reasonable person, had a double major, master's degree, double major in history and math, master's degree from Columbia University. Okay, so well-educated is all I'm pointing out, who, when she first was first pregnant, religion had not been so maligned in her eyes that she was still casting about thinking, I should really raise my kids within a faith tradition. They can decide for themselves, but I think it'd be good for them. There's a lot of people who still think like that, despite all the propaganda about, religion in general, Christianity in particular, how it's some sort of evil boogeyman that just corrupts and traumatizes people. There's still a number of people out there in the real world, on the ground floor, who still think there are positive benefits to religion. And when they think about raising their kids, they go, I don't really think it's right to raise my kids apart from from religion. She meant it more in secular terms, but I perfectly understood where she was coming from. And I was not a Christian at the time. I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Give them some place to go on Sunday, some type of education, religious things, and, maybe they'll take to it, maybe they won't. That was the theory behind her thinking. But the point is, okay, the point still remains. There is theoretically at least a transformational power available to the practicing Christian. When you dig in and you start, most of the Christians you meet, or a huge chunk of the Christians you interact with, if you actually poked around and asked them, they will give you a transformational testimony, some form of testimony along those lines, and you will believe them. You will know to some degree that they are telling the truth. I've never heard anybody doubt David Wood. Never heard a single person doubt that David Wood started out as a psychopath, became a Christian, and somehow was able to, using the power of religion or using the power of spiritual experiences, able to transform himself to some degree and heal. Now, I get you're not going to believe that that's the power of the living God. The only question I'm asking you is, how does that constitute, in your eyes, zero evidence? How does it constitute no evidence? Do you just hear it and not process it? That's the question. Because that's an important question. That seems to be the case. You hear it, know he's telling the truth, only half process it, then start immediately looking for defeaters. And the defeater you usually bring to the table is, well, there's a Hindu somewhere, David Wood, and you don't believe that, and he'll say that his religion transformed his life. Now, maybe David Wood will take the bait and go, yeah, he's of the devil. I won't take that. Maybe that's why you do it. Because most Christians take the bait and start trashing the spiritual experiences of other religions. But for you, the atheist, if you care what's true, and a scientist would care what's true, wouldn't automatically compare an experience over here to another experience over there and go, they're different, therefore neither has any power. He'd investigate the phenomena with as much integrity and as much correcting for as much confirmation bias as he possibly could. Correct. So he wouldn't write it off either way. Wouldn't write off the Hindu claim of transformational healing, and he wouldn't write off the Christian one. He'd investigate, and he'd correct for his own biases, and try to find out what's really going on. And very few atheists actually approach it that way. You know the stories are true, to some degree. You know the stories are true to some degree. Nobody has ever thought that I'm not telling the truth. that I was, a functional alcoholic, and that I had smoked 3 packs of cigarettes, and within a year I was healed of all of that. Nobody doubts that. But the only question I'm asking you is, how does that constitute in your mind no evidence for God? That seems to be a way of bending over backwards to make sure it isn't processed accurately. There is transformational power out there. Now, granted, you're listening to me, you're listening to David Wood, that's anecdotal evidence to you. But these testimonies number in the thousands. These testimonies number in the thousands. And almost all of them are believable enough that you know something real is going on to some degree, unless you are working really hard to convince yourself otherwise. That's the point. Why work really hard to convince yourself otherwise? These testimonies are available in the thousands, and they are all plausible enough that they constitute at least some evidence for the transformational power of religious experiences. You can at least acknowledge that. Why not process it accurately and correctly? Why not process it in a way that's non-biased? Because they do. And like I said, it may be anecdotal evidence to you listening to me. Some of you know me. Maybe some of the people listening don't know me at this point. Okay? So it's just an anecdote to you. But you take me, you take David Wood, and then you have anecdotal evidence multiplied to the thousands, which actually is called data. Data. And what I think you find out if you compare the Christian data empirically to the Hindu data, you'd find that, our Sky Ferry is changing more lives than theirs. That's probably how I write theirs off. I know for a fact that the guy Josh Wolf was telling the truth. And I know for a fact that to some degree that his religious experiences helped him combat his anxiety. I believe him 100%. Almost positive he's telling the truth. It matches reality. So I don't write him off. What a rational person would do is investigate which the Hindus or the Christians in general and specifically which have more claims, and which of those claims are more compelling and convincing, and which of them seem to offer more power empirically available to their practitioners to transform their lives. There's transformational power available in their spiritual experiences too. That's pretty crystal clear. If you listen to Josh Wolf, like I said, I believe him 100%. The interesting thing, though, if you are an atheist listening to me, okay, it's the only important thing is how you process this and how you hear. You say no evidence. You're presented with evidence. Do you process it at all? Because I don't see you investigating the Hindus either. I don't see you asking them questions either. I don't see you reading their studies on transformational power either. See you playing the same scams you run on them. Let me try to debunk, dismiss, and discredit you instead of actually process what you are saying and actively engage with your claims in an honest way. Now, I'm not talking to everybody. Not all atheists do this. Some atheists actually pride themselves on going about looking what you should be doing all the time. As a matter of course, is steelmanning Christianity constantly. That should be your goal. And finding the strongest possible claims for transformational experience. They're out there, and they're easy to find. David Woods is probably in the stronger version, and investigating them. The two guys who are doing this right are James and Nathan. They do this type of thing. They have these 7-hour streams where they take. I mean, they're not necessarily getting the strongest, but they're getting this. They're doing it right. They are taking the stronger claims and investigating them and seeing if they have any type of validity or if they offer any type of evidence for any truth in religious experiences at all. Because if you start finding any truth, that's truth. If you find any transformational power, then that's some transformational power. That a scientist would say to himself, that needs to be accounted for. That can't just be dismissed as nothing. Obviously, these people are all sick and deluded, or their lives wouldn't be being healed by fairy tales. That seems to be the counter argument. You and the Hindu are both sick and deluded, or your lives wouldn't be so easily transformed by fairy tales. Well, that's hand-wringing. That is dismissing something in importantly destructive and fallacious ways. Why? Because there's really obviously something going on. Really obviously a transformational power there that is available, and that needs to be explored, analyzed, and identified. And that's what a scientist would do. a scientist would correct for their own confirmation bias. Can't be God. Why? Because God doesn't exist. Everyone knows that. Because I lack a belief in God. That's the atheist. Can't be God. Why? Because I just don't believe in God. Same reason I don't believe in Thor. I swear to God, that's what most atheists would say. That's what they do. Can't be transformational power in your life, Craig. Why? Can't be God. Why? Because I don't believe in God. Same reason I don't believe in Thor, Craig. You don't believe in Thor? Okay, same reason. That's the quality of the argumentation out there. That's the quality of the quote-unquote critical thinking skills going on out there in the atheist community. I'm not kidding. The people who are listening to me, if you're an atheist listening to me, are generally the smart set atheists. You don't do this. But a huge chunk of your peers do. A huge chunk of your peers do. I would venture to say half. So, I'm only talking to the smart atheists who care what's true. They're out there and they listen to my channel. How do you process it? How do you come up with a theory? If it isn't actually the living God transforming people's lives, how do you process it? What's going on? Why is there power there available at all? You've heard David Wood's testimony. You can go listen to his testimony. He did transform his life. You buy that, right? Okay, what's going on? If you care what's true, that should be the real honest question to you. And that should be something you want to find out to some degree. If you care what's true. If you don't care what's true, then play stupid games with the childish atheists out there on Twitter. Because that's all they do. Play stupid games that sound clever but actually make me think they're dumb. They sound clever to them. Because they're not paying attention to what actual intelligence is. So, there you have it, kids. I thought that was worth saying. I'll try to keep these videos shorter. I know everyone wants to hear me talk. I know. We want to hear you talk, right? I know, I understand that. But, so I will wrap it up and I'll leave it with that. The transformational power available to the practicing Christian. This is theoretical at least, but if you start investigating the claims of actual Christians, you'll find them easy to find. And they aren't that theoretical. Most of the Christians who have YouTube channels have some video in there somewhere about how Jesus transformed their life or how Christianity transformed their lives. And yeah, the Hindus do too. Investigate their claims too. Don't just write them off either. Or whatever, whichever. Investigate all of the claims with integrity. Start demanding of yourself more integrity when you approach a subject. Why? Because it's a complicated and interesting subject. And it's worth you approaching it honestly. That's what it's worth. And it's worth it to you to do that. So, there you have it, kids. With that, I will leave you. Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.